right, here we are. It is Monday, the very first Monday of March.
Yes.
Very exciting. Hopefully you all had a fantastic weekend as we ushered in meteorological spring. We'll be talking about that in very short order. Thanks for joining us here, Wisconsin's weather experts on Fox Local. Make sure you tell all your friends and family and everybody else about Fox Local, downloading the app both for your smart TV and your phone. Lisa, did you have a nice weekend?
I did. You know what? I was thinking warmer thoughts, spring thoughts.
The sun was nice.
It was.
It was an abrupt change. We're going to talk about it, but we did go from very mild to not quite so mild.
Yeah.
But at least the sunshine, it psychologically makes a difference. It's proven scientific fact. We're not just saying it. It is true.
And even though it was colder, in fact, the coldest temperatures for us here locally were on the weekend for the week. We've dealt with colder this winter, so the sunshine was great. Cold.
I went out for a nice look. It was a good hour walk.
Yeah.
Just walked around the neighborhood. And
it was beautiful.
Yeah.
We just need, I think, as we're transitioning into the transition months now of spring, some nicer days where we can fully get out without all the salt on the ground and just be able to not have as breezy days either.
We've had some the wind was a little cutting on the weekend for sure. So yes, as we were just saying off the top, we have started a whole new season meteorologically. It'll be a few more days yet before we get to astronomical spring, but we've started meteorological spring. So looking back at winter,
we definitely had a colder winter than last year, but average temperatures 26 degrees. We were again below average, but 41st coldest, so not bad there. Precip-wise, though, we kind of struggled in that category.
That was the one that jumped out at me. I mean, we've had a fairly low-end snowfall season, but historically not that crazy. I mean, 31st is saying something, given that our records go back to, the late 1800s, but still, 7th driest to crack top 10. So that's lack of snow, lack of rain, so the liquid equivalent of the snow, obviously. More than 3 inches below.
Yeah, we had a lot of these systems passes to the north and passes to the south.
We were in this weird little buttonhole, little pocket, almost like a permanent dry slot of precipitation. And that's going to have ripple effects down the road, of course, as we get into the growing season for home gardeners, but more so for agricultural interests, because they rely on having that snowpack to kind of saturate that topsoil because it sits there and slowly melts into it. And we're lacking by 3 inches, and we didn't get the snow.
And that's a big thing, which we may not always want the snow in the winter months for some, but it's super beneficial come the spring months, especially when growing season kicks in.
We don't want to shovel it, but we do like the gardeners to have it to grow all the food we eat. So let's compare the winter we just had to the one before, because what's fascinating here is we're talking about an El Nino winter and a La Nina winter.
Correct. And one of the big things we may have noticed was the temperature. Last winter, we had an average temp of 34.7 degrees, and if you recall, it was the warmest winter we've ever had in the record books for Milwaukee. This winter, again, we just averaged 26, so 42nd warmest. It certainly still felt warm on some days, but
it's still in that greater trend of warming, but not as extreme as last year.
Correct. Precipitation, you were mentioning on that, the drought that we still have. Part of that did go down to those precipitation numbers, and that's going to have a big impact. As we go back to that graphic quickly, not only dealing with a significant less amount of precip, I mean, take a look. Last year, 6.33.
It's basically a third.
Yeah.
This year we had about a third of what we had last year. Now that's an abrupt change. And there's the snow total. It's interesting to me that we actually squeaked out a win this winter, considering how long it took. But we did it at this last minute sprint. So a good chunk of the 24-25 winter was also lacking in snow.
And something to note is, even though meteorological winter has passed, we typically still see snow in March, even heading into April. So it doesn't mean we're snow-free here, but we are at least looking warmer.
Don't put the snow shovels away just yet. Don't put the snow brush back in the trunk. You're going to need it at some point. In fact, let's take a look at what March typically offers us here as we kick off the new season. If we take a look ahead, this is, to me, is the one that jumps off of this, is the normal high. By normal, we mean the average high for the climate period. So it's a mathematical normal, not that that's the normal type of weather as like a judgment statement, but you go from the first at 39 degrees to the 31st at 49 degrees.
Big warm up.
It's 10 degrees. Those are 10 very important degrees, right? A almost 50 degree day versus just barely 40 degree day. Yeah, very different wardrobe right there. And look at the extremes just over the years too. Just back in 2012, 84. Meanwhile, 1962, we dipped to 10 below.
Man.
Yeah, and there, as you said, is the snow.
Yeah.
We do typically get about 6 inches worth of snow.
Yeah, and typically our month with the most amount of snow is February when I was looking at the stats. So that doesn't mean we can't see snow. We need snow for the added moisture. But as we've been talking about, meteorological spring is here, and that means bigger changes to come. Typically less snow, warmer temperatures that we've been talking about.
And people, I feel like, are getting used to this concept of meteorological versus astronomical.
Yes.
But why don't we do a little bit more of an explainer as to what it is?
And that's what we're really going to focus on. You know, this started on Saturday, March 1st. We usually separate this by months. We do 3-month periods. It is a little bit easier for meteorologists to categorize what happens in a 3-month period. And we're going to break this down for you. We just got out of winter. It's typically our coldest months of the year, December, January, and February, where we at least have our typical high temperatures in the 30-degree range, reaching that 40-degree mark. Now we are in what is called meteorological spring, as we've been talking about. We are getting warmer. Rob mentioned 39 degrees is typically what we see for the 1st of March, and by the end of March, 49 degrees. So spring is going to consist of March, April, and May. We usually have that warmer trend upwards for spring in the transition months. And then we get to meteorological summer, which will be June, July, and August. Our temperatures there usually are in the 70 to 80 degree range. Then, of course, as we head into fall, meteorological fall, we get colder yet again, and we signify that as September, October, and November. So really, it's kind of like this up and down trend, roller coaster wise. Temperatures that we see, meteorological spring, again, March, April, and May. We talk about temps warming up, and that's really what we use for the official weather records.
Sure.
Astronomical spring, I know the calendars usually recognize it as that, but it's a little bit different, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, astronomical spring obviously has to do with the orbit around the sun and the tilt of the Earth, and sometimes it's a little counterintuitive for a lot of folks because we're actually closer to the sun in winter, but we're pointed away from it.
Yes.
And what I like to use to explain that is if you're at a campfire and you take half a step toward the fire, you might get a little warmer, but if you turn away from the fire, your face is going to get a lot colder.
That's such a great analogy for it.
So it's just a way to think about why we're colder even though we're closer. And of course, the number of days varies. And part of the reason why meteorological spring is kept the way it is so we don't have to do that crazy math of, okay, this year spring started this time on this date. That last year it was this. So it's just clean bookkeeping. It also makes for much stronger data comparisons from one spring to the next spring. So here we are. We've started spring now, which means we need to give you an idea of what's coming your way in the next little while and take a look at that bigger picture.
Yeah, and bigger picture, regionally, the first week of March, it's going to be a very active setup. When we start heading into these spring months, not only are we still dealing with snow, but severe weather comes into play, and there's going to be quite a bit of areas across the United States dealing with severe weather. So we're going to break into that forecast as we continue to look at what's happening again across the region and United States. We are expected, as we look at the graphics here, to be dealing with a increasing low pressure system that is bringing us warm fronts across areas of the Midwest, and that is pumping in warmer air from the Gulf and more moist air, I may add, all the way up to the upper portions of the Midwest, while meanwhile the East Coast has high pressure where things are remaining calm. But notice what we're tracking just south of Salt Lake City, another strengthening low that is also going to cause a mess across the United States from the Midwest to the Great Plains and the Gulf Coast as we head through the upcoming days. Take a look at all the watches and warnings that are already in effect from areas near Minnesota all the way down to Texas. Now, of course, temperature and where that low sits is going to vary in what those watches and warnings are. The further north you are, that is where we are tracking those states dealing with snow and blizzard risks. So winter weather advisories and warnings and blizzards possible for areas there. Then further south, where it's warmer, we're tracking high winds and elevated fire risks. And not to mention, what you don't see here is the severe weather threat. We are going to get more into the wildfires that we've been dealing with, or fires in general across the United States coming up, because that has impacted us here locally. But because of the lack of snow we've had, a lower amount of precipitation, vegetation is drier, and that's going to cause a concern when we see high winds come into play, and also impacting, again, the potential for fires to spread easily. So really a big portion of the United States still dealing with with dry, moderate, or even extreme drought conditions. We're stretching that all the way to the East Coast as well. So it's not only here locally, it is nationwide that those impacts are still persisting. One of the things we are tracking, though, is we are again heading into March. Severe weather season is here before you know it. And really, we've enhanced now an area across portions of Oklahoma and northern Texas for the threat of severe weather today. We are tracking the threat not only for tornadoes, but damaging winds and hail. And as that strengthening low continues to move away from New Mexico and head eastward, take a look at the broad area that severe weather is looking to impact. This then stretches not only from Oklahoma today, but all the way to portions of Kentucky, Tennessee, Georgia, and even the Carolinas heading into tomorrow and extending into Wednesday. Then that pushes towards the East Coast. So this massive system is going to bring widespread impacts, from the potential of strong winds that could lead to fires to severe weather across the central plains and southern half of the United States, while areas here locally and northward could be dealing with the winter weather, 4 to 8 inches of snow, as well as blizzard conditions. So again, large impacts with systems, especially with the changing months and our temperatures beginning to warm. Then we have to really focus in on some of these events that could bring some severe weather. So we're tracking again regionally across the Midwest. Clouds are increasing for the first half of the week. We're not going to see a lot of sun across the Midwest until the end of the week. But this is where that low again is bringing in all that moisture. That is again going to bring the active weather further south near Kansas City and into Oklahoma, while here locally we're going to be tracking more widespread rain as we're progressing into Tuesday. There could even be a little bit of thunder in that, but no severe weather in Illinois or Milwaukee. What we're tracking heading into Wednesday, though, it's the transition from a lot of rain that could be several inches with cold air wrapping around this that could bring areas snow, which is why some of these locations have had the winter headlines issued already. Snow looking to again linger into Wednesday, but then notice that clearing line in the Great Plains, and this will eventually move eastward. That will give us some sunshine back by the end of the week. Now, again, across the United States, while we've talked about severe weather, we're also going to have to focus on the flooding risk. This system is going to pack a lot of moisture with it, so that is going to put, again, the Midwest heading into the Mississippi River Valley and near the Gulf under a marginal or even slight risk for some flooding, as areas could be seeing 1 to 2 inches of rain. Some spots could see more. And because our ground is still frozen, this could have impacts of that actually soaking into the ground. So there could be some areas dealing with some localized flooding. Again, any kind of water that goes into the rivers and streams, that then elevates the level of water there too, causing, again, some localized flooding in those spots. And also keep in mind, we still have some ice on bodies of water that also can create ice jams, which can aggravate flooding even more. So a lot to look forward to, at least for impacts nationwide going forward. Take a look at our temperatures, though. We have most of the United States in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and even 70s in Texas. Again, the difference between some of the cold air and warm air is where we're tracking the severe weather threat for today. As we extend the forecast out, though, heading into March, notice that the 8th through the 12th, we have the same area dealing with a higher probability of above average temperatures. And we're still expected to have above average temperatures as we head further into March towards the 16th, as that area of warm air with that system is going to extend to the East Coast. Then colder air looks to arrive back to the West Coast. So again, a lot of changes as we're heading into the first week of March, and especially as we head into the weeks ahead, we'll have to see what Mother Nature brings us. So very active, though, Rob. You know, we have a lot going on. It's not just here locally, but it's going to be something we'll have to watch through the upcoming weeks.
Yeah, a lot happening, and obviously that means a lot of great weather video for us to share. I want you to take a look at this. This is actually new video out of the Carolina forest area, and it's like a wall of fire near homes there. Evacuations taking place or took place there. This is an incredible line of fire there. This is more or it's one of more than 175 wildfires that have torched more than 4,200 acres in the Carolinas. So the governor there, Governor of South Carolina, declaring a state of emergency on Sunday, and much, of course, of the eastern U.S. is under increased fire threat, as we were just talking about. Dry, windy conditions. In fact, coming up, we are going to focus a little bit on that as well. Our area recently had some brush fires. We've got some video of that, and with the ongoing drought and the wind conditions that we have, we're going to keep an eye on our fire weather. That's all just coming up after this. Stick around. Welcome back to Wisconsin's Weather Experts here on Fox Local. We were just talking about wildfires, of course, in the Carolinas, and obviously the big news out of California that continues there as well. But we have had similar conditions locally, and just recently, our dry conditions and the high winds led to a brush fire in Palmyra. They're getting the video right there. It was a 5-alarm fire. Multiple fire departments out there in Palmyra, just kind of on the south side of town near the Hillside Cemetery, if you're familiar with that area. Fire ended up burning around 95 acres. It's a pretty sizable chunk right there before it was then contained. No injuries were reported. In Walworth County, a brush fire shut down part of Highway 12 for a little bit as well near Bloomfield. That's just outside of Lake Geneva. They're still waiting to learn exactly how many acres were burned on that one, but we do know the good news is no one was hurt. But Lisa, the conditions have been right lately for this. So where are we with drought and fire weather?
Yeah, that's what we're going to continue to talk about. You know, we talked a little bit about regionally how our drought conditions were, and unfortunately here for the state of Wisconsin, we are still under dry and moderate drought conditions in northern portions of the state as well as southern portions of the state. We kind of have a little donut hole here from Green Bay heading towards the Dells. A lot of the systems that we've been dealing with bringing rain and snow have either passed us to the north or passed us to the south. So unfortunately that led to a deficit of precipitation and snowfall, which is why we are still dealing with moderate drought conditions across the state of Wisconsin. Now, Rob just mentioned southern portions of the state, Palmyra, also heading just to the east of or west of Lake Geneva. We had those brush fires, and really the fire risk, especially for southern portions of the state, is under a moderate risk, while we have a low risk stretching into central and northern portions of the state. And again, this is going to vary as we head from week to week. This is, again, something we're having to track in terms of low pressure systems heading our way, how are our current drought conditions looking across the state, and how is it looking also soil-wise in terms of temperature? Can we see some of these systems actually have the precipitation absorb into the soil, which could get us out of some of the drought conditions and inevitably could also lower the fire risk? But we are going to have to watch, again, many areas for the state of Wisconsin, as fires can still be very favorable to spread because we are under drought condition currently. One of the other things we're also tracking that you need for fires risk ingredients to kind of come together for these fires to rapidly spread: warm temperatures. And that's something that we are continuing to deal with heading into the first week of March. We are looking at having above average temperatures here locally, low relative humidity, which you have to have 25% or less, and winds, which have to be 15 miles an hour or stronger. Now, of course, we already have the dry fuel as vegetation for the most part. Grasses, shrubs, trees have been very dry, but we've also had some strong winds this past week, which again aided to help the ingredients come together for those brush fires to ignite and spread rather rapidly. So when we do have windier days, especially since we're still under those drought conditions, it is very important to not ignite anything on fire intentionally or even unintentionally. If you have just the smallest ember, that can easily spread quickly, even if you're not intending it to. So we are continuing to watch the drought conditions because that plays the crucial role in helping some of those fires spread. And we've been talking, you know, Rob, you had the video of the Carolinas dealing with their fires. Us here locally and other areas of the United States are still dealing with fire problems as well.
Yeah, of course, out on the West Coast, the Los Angeles wildfires, they are over right now. But of course, that then gets to the question of where did all that toxic debris go? Everything that was burned and all of the plastics and everything that was burned up with it. And residents are finding it everywhere. They're asking some tough questions about, you know, who's responsible for all of this. Fox News correspondent Bill Milligan was there in Los Angeles.
California is still recovering from a series of massive wildfires that destroyed thousands of homes. But after the fires came near record rainfall and mudslides, pushing much of the toxic debris into the ocean. Now it's washing up on beaches throughout Southern California. County officials are warning residents to stay clear, but many beachgoers say they never got the message.
I'm definitely probably going to dry off now, just because I haven't heard anything.
I do have concerns, and I'm having second thoughts as to where we're sitting.
Meanwhile, there's a growing controversy over where all the ash and waste will be stored. Officials here have approved 3 sites so far, prompting criticism from locals near at least one of the dumps, claiming the debris represents a major health risk.
Going to go into our ground, going to ultimately go into our water, and it's going to be a second disaster.
The protest came just hours after California Governor Gavin Newsom announced a new recovery and rebuilding plan, claiming 99% of the debris had been removed by the EPA and the rest was up to the military.
The Army Corps is substantially responsible for those complex properties and all the other additional properties.
But he's also promising the rest of the debris will be removed quickly so the recovery plan can ramp up.
The goal is simple: record time to finish the job with phase 2 debris removal.
And federal officials say this week they won't be conducting tests on soil samples from the burn areas, despite concerns about possible contamination. In Los Angeles, Bill Malugin, Fox News.
Tragic story there. That's
Such
going
a big loss.
Yeah, it's going to have a ripple effect too, not just for months. It'll be years, perhaps decades before we get all of the answers and come out from all of the devastation out there for sure. All right, coming up in a little bit, we're going to pivot a little bit. We've got a cool viewer pick to talk about, something called a hole punch cloud. We have a lot of cloud cover right now. Not too many holes punched in that.
No, not too many holes punched, but you know, we have a lot more to educate you on. I think you'll be intrigued coming up in Wisconsin Weather Experts.
All right, welcome back to the show. We get so many cool pictures from our viewers.
Yeah.
We have like the best viewers in the world. They're always very interactive. You guys are great. And they send us these cool pictures, and 99% of the time we know exactly what we're looking at, which is great.
But they don't.
They don't, yes. Occasionally, though, I do get pics. I'm like, I don't know what that is. You're going to have to let me know, or I'm going to have to do some research. But as soon as we got this one, we knew right away, because it's actually one of my favorite phenomenon. You can see it looks almost like a ring or a hole, and then some clouds kind of streaking or falling out of that hole. So this is what's known as a fall streak hole or a hole punch cloud. It's kind of a fascinating situation. So what happens is the high to mid-level clouds typically have what we call supercooled water droplets. So it's still technically liquid water, even though it is actually cooled to or below actually the freezing point. That's what the supercooled is all about. And then what they need to kind of start to actually freeze and become actual crystals that could fall and form this little fall streak is for something to be introduced into that supercooled environment. So planes, when they fly through that cloud deck, they introduce that little particulate, their little ice crystal, that will create this dropping effect where all of the cloud starts to condense, the droplets freeze, and they start to fall. And of course, they don't make it to the ground because the air is typically pretty dry when these things form, but they create this streak coming out of the hole. And sometimes you can even see perfectly blue sky in and around that streak, so it gets these cool names of a fall streak hole or a hole punch cloud, because in a way, a hole was punched in the cloud
literally
by the plane. So it's kind of a fascinating thing for sure.
Well, and I think it's awesome. You know, I was out there taking a picture of the clouds this morning, in fact. So if you have any questions, whether it's sending in pictures or any questions about weather in general, we have a great QR code that you'll be able to scan if we pop it up. Maybe we're not able to. There we go, right there.
There it is.
You can pop it up, take a picture with your smartphone, and send us your question, and we'll hopefully be able to answer it here on our WWE show.
We'll do the research if we have to, but yeah, it's always fun to do that. But we leave you with a little bit of fun here on a high note today. At least these folks think it's fun. It was a world record polar plunge. Look at all of those folks out there, 2,400 people.
Wow.
In this freezing plunge, the polar bear dip in the Czech Republic, or Czechia as it's known now. They came away with the world record for it. The polar bear swimmers overtook the previous record of 1,799. That was set back in 2015 in Poland. For the record to count, they had to be wearing swimsuits. We're happy about that. They had to be at least waist deep in the water, and they had to hang out in the water. The water had to be at least 38 degrees. They had to be there for a minute.
Oh, that's hard.
38 degree water.
I don't see one person shivering.
They seem
or
okay with
really
it.
red. Maybe they're just used to it.
Wait till they get out.
Yeah, well, that's when it hits you, right?
And
Just
then
a
it's
little
get
wind.
me a towel. Yes. All right, thank you for joining us for another edition of Wisconsin's Weather Experts here on Fox Local. We'll see you Tuesday, same time.